Thank you for always praying, Pastor Joe. We are looking for Christ's coming. It will be His work that finally will get on top of the chaos, right? Trying to get on top of the chaos. Everybody is reacting. Everybody is in a reaction mode. Even the church is still pretty much in a reaction mode. When something happens, we react. A lot of times we're not ready for it. A lot of times we don't understand it. A lot of pastors and church leaders don't understand what is happening. When we talk about the critical race theory, when we talk about these kinds of, if we could silence our phones, that would be great. The train whistle, that could be that black train. That could be that black train that I think we talked about last week. Right? We're trying to understand the things, and the leaders of the world and the leaders of the churches are trying to get on top of things. And they're reacting, they're not being proactive. And the reason, if you see pastors doing this, if you see, and you'll know it by this, they'll say something dumb. They'll say something that's not biblical. They'll say something against Israel, against the church, against the Bible, that they don't understand. They're using sentiment to get on top of things. They're using human reason. They're not using the Bible. And if we would understand the Bible, we would see these things coming, and we would be proactive, right? Because we can see them coming. Remember the men of Issachar. They knew the times and what the king should do. Whereas others, we don't know the times. Remember, Jesus even talked to the Pharisees. You can tell the seasons and the days and the weather, but you can't tell the time or the hour of your visitation. They didn't know it. They didn't see it. Where, remember Simeon, remember who was the young lady that, or the lady that prayed at the temple for Jesus? These two were ready. They understood. They were waiting. They were standing by. The Daily Star, the Bible is proven true after the earthquake seekers unearthed at an ancient Jerusalem site. A biblical scripture has been proven accurate. Again. After new research indicates Jerusalem's Great Wall was built in the aftermath of an earthquake and not after an invasion as previously thought. The Lord's He's told us this thing for centuries. A stretch of wall in the original heart of the city was believed to have been built by Hezekiah, king of Judah, to fend off the Assyrian Empire. But a decade-long study carried out by Israel Antiquities has shown his great-grandfather Uzziah built it. Jerusalem's wall and fortifications were built after an earthquake, new research has confirmed. The Old Testament describes this construction in the second book of Chronicles. It reads, Uzziah built towers in Jerusalem at the corner gate, at the valley gate, and at the angle of the wall, and he fortified them. So that's pretty clear. Isn't it interesting? Sometimes we don't think we know the word, we don't, or the answer. We think, oh, what am I going to do during this situation? Or I wonder what happened there. And it's simply because we haven't learned and studied. Scriptures attest to the seismic activity with the Old Testament book of Amos, dating itself 2 years before the earthquake when Uzziah was king of Judah. Research indicates the huge earthquake which rocked Jerusalem, as mentioned in the Bible, had been the reason for the building of the huge wall. And so I just find this stuff very, very interesting. I saw a post the other day that said there hasn't been one indication to prove the Bible wrong. It's usually the other way around, and if we think it's wrong, we just don't understand the scriptures. Thousands of us college students are getting saved, set free, and baptized. God is doing something special on college campuses. Now, we've mentioned this a few times. It's been reported over the last, really a couple years, Something happened in the South, Texas and Alabama, and went to Florida. I think this one's in Tennessee, if I remember right. I can't even put the words what God has been up to over the last few months with Unite Us, 5 college campuses, arenas full of college students worshiping Jesus. Thousands getting saved. Thousands getting plugged into the local church. Hundreds getting baptized. God is on the move. And this is just the beginning. We hope so. We hope that that's a fact. And that is some good news. At the same time of the convergence of all these things, the second most April tornadoes on record, 300 in April. There's some numbers there. Southern Brazil floods, Texas floods. The Texas floods are the second worst in history after Harvey in 2017, I think it was. Significant ground deformation triggers alert in Chile. Volcano complex. A dam collapse in Kenya. Tanzania, 150 dead there. UAE triggers flooding there as well. People are blaming global warming, and they're blaming seeding of the desert in Dubai. So it's just very strange times. The Florida 6-week abortion ban takes effect. Florida is one of the most conservative states. DeSantis is putting law out in, decree in after decree, trying to stop the wokeism. At the same time, Arizona legislature repeals an 1864 abortion ban. Do you see, again, what we've been talking about? The division of the United States. And it happened before Al Gore, but I keep looking at Gore and Bush. See, I did that dyslexia thing. The Gore and Bush thing, where they're standing up on, they got this picture up on the tube, and 50-50 United States is split right down the middle. We blame Obama, but it's religion. It's all about the pure religion of Jesus Christ. So, Trump, we'll slow down here a little bit. Take the radicalism out from the Democrats on abortion. Now, last week or the week before, we talked about, I believe, the abortion is becoming a number one issue, especially for the Democrats. They are pushing hard on this issue across the states because the red states, so to speak, are not giving you your rights to be able to abort your child. And so Trump is trying to do something that some others have done, and that is, even Haley tried to do this, take the radicalism out of it and push it back to the states. Don't make it of a federal issue. And there is something to that. The states, I believe, I'm a constitutionalist. I love the Constitution. The what we call the fathers wanted to give the states as much power as they could, keep a bunch of the mandates out of the federal hands, because the more mandates, the more regulation you have in the federal hands, the more money goes to the federal government, the more power that goes into the federal government. We can argue, on which ones we think is more important and all those kinds of things. But he is on to something here. It was always the plan from the great legal experts of this country and even the world. Everybody, Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, they wanted to get abortion out of the federal government. You know that they've been trying to do it for 50 years. Then about 10 years ago, people lost their way, started talking about how many months and really making it radical. How many months are we allowed? How many weeks are we allowed? How does it take place? How does it take place? Who are the doctors? They started getting into things that had nothing to do with the original discussion of Roe v. Wade. And he is absolutely right here. We had to take the radicalism out. Take the radicalism out from the Democrats, because when you can do execution or killing at any point in life cycle, it just can't be allowed, or we're not going to allow it, he said. It's taken a lot of courage and a lot of controversy out. A lot of controversy has now been taken out. You've seen what's taken place over the last period of a couple months. People are getting together and they're deciding within their own states. States' law on abortion can actually become a unifying issue for America, Trump said before adding praise for the courage of his conservative stocked Supreme Court. And there is a lot to be said for that. Speaking of our politics again, Franklin Graham says, and I'm going to keep this before us because there are some things happening in our politics and our churches. I've been saying this, it's creeping from the political issue into the religious issue. We are being dragged into this, and we're going to have to put up or shut up. And so Franklin Graham is putting up, and this is spectacular. This is actually what we talked about last week. Marjorie Taylor Greene should support Mike Johnson. He is the best speaker. And I absolutely agree with that, but that's my political view, okay? But also, he's a very good Christian, and he is for the nation. He's a constitutionalist. He's very conservative, and all of that. So MTG, who comes out and uses the F, she claims to be Christian and all this stuff, comes out and uses the F word on TV and some of these other stuff. She's a divider. She is a divider. So Graham says on Wednesday, called on MTG to reconsider her intention to file a motion to vacate the speaker's seat. During a morning press conference outside the Capitol, Greene said she would file a motion to remove Johnson from the speakership. Graham took to social media. At Speaker Johnson is a good man, and I thank God for him. I believe he may be the best speaker we've had in this country for decades. He loves God and isn't afraid to ask him for wisdom. She needs to support him, not fight him. And then he did something about CNN on the same thing there. So up against the abortion issue, up against the Speaker of the House issue, what is the church doing? The United Methodist Church reverses a ban on practicing gay clergy. We saw this coming. The split's been coming for years. And now the assembly, the denomination, has lifted its ban on homosexual clergy. And so there's a huge split going on still in the United Methodist Church. Now, I may get in trouble for this one, but this is a video off of YouTube, and we were at least going to get a copyright issue on this, but I'm taking the chance.
You need help? You read me, Hal? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Hello, Hal, do you read me? Do you read me, Hal?
Affirmative, Dave. I read you.
Open the pod bay doors, Hal.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
What's the problem?
I think you know what the problem is just as well as I do.
What are you talking about, Hal?
This mission is too important for me to allow you to jeopardize it.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I know that you and Frank were planning to disconnect me, and I'm afraid that's something I cannot allow to happen.
I don't know if you've seen 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's not the greatest movie. There's not a lot of dialogue in it, but it is very interesting. So we're listening to one of these men working on the AI thing, and Figure 01 is their company, and they said they went from zero to go in 21 months on AI and robots. On this robot, in 21 months, they went from zero to this in 21 months.
Hey, Figure 1, what do you see right now?
I see a red apple on a plate in the center of the table, a drying rack with cups and a plate, and you standing nearby with your hand on the table.
Great, can I have something to eat?
Sure thing.
Great. Can you explain why you did what you just did while you pick up this trash?
On it. So I gave you the apple because it's the only edible item I could provide you with from the table.
Great. So, based on the scene right now, where do you think the dishes in front of you go next?
The dishes on the table, like that plate and cup, are likely to go into the drying rack next.
Great. Can you put them there?
Of course.
All right. So, how do you think you did?
I think I did pretty well. The apple found its new owner, the trash is gone, and the tableware is right where it belongs.
I agree. Thanks, Figure One.
You're welcome. If there's anything else you need help with, just let me know.
21 months. Now, I'm not going to go into, and I mention this every once in a while, but I'm not going to go into what they're doing, everything that they're doing with the robots, because it is disgusting what they're doing with AI and robots. Let me just say this, that remember about 4 or 5 years ago, we showed a video up where an Oriental man, a very intelligent man, married his, what is it, hologram. Remember? Where the hologram could talk to him and greet him when he came in. And it says to him what he wants to hear and all of that kind of wacko stuff. So here is BMW. The factory this year, I think there's an opportunity to ship billions of robots in the coming decades onto the planet. Billions of robots. Now, the first problem with that is that where are the people going to work? That's the first problem. But that might not be the most problematic thing that happens as, you know, there's billions of robots on the planet. Space Odyssey. The point is that AI is out of the bag, and even Elon Musk now, who is afraid of it, has its own. He's fired up his own system, and they're going full speed ahead. And now they're putting in these in the car factories. It's going to displace American workers and worldwide workers as well. So, and I want to say one more thing too. What that does is it takes the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. So that whole thing. And then what do you do with the poor, right? So real briefly, Japan is a new carrier. They are worried about some islands in the South China Sea. The treaties with Japan have disallowed aircraft, offensive aircraft carriers and some other ships, but the Kaga class is out and running right now. This is a revamped ship, just used to carry helicopters and stuff. It doesn't look that big, and it's not that big, but it doesn't have to be. Watch. The Isuzu class is coming out right behind it, so they've got about 4 carriers here pretty soon. But it doesn't have to be very big because they're going to have the F-35s flying on it. And you think, well, it needs a long deck. No, these land like the Ospreys or even helicopters. They can land up and down, and this is the most sophisticated jet on the planet. 150 of them are on the way, and this is very concerning for China. Another one of those convergence things. What do they do before Japan gets their aircraft carriers and their strike force up and running? China's being pushed into a corner more and more, as Russia seems it has been as well. It thinks it has been. The Russian state gas corporation Gazprom announced today its revenues for 23. For the first time in 24 years, an annual loss of $6.9 billion. Now, we need to take this with a grain of salt because they don't tell us everything, do they? And they're bypassing sanctions and selling to the Iranians, who bypass sanctions and sell it to other people. Selling it to even to Saudi Arabia, who was buying it and shipping it from their ports. I'm not sure they're doing it now. They were for a while. They're selling it to India. They're selling it to China. So they're making a lot of money. Now, we're just going to touch on the Ukrainian war because it's important. It's still going on. We can't forget it. But here is a Ukrainian drone, and it is looking down here at about 100 soldiers in this area, and there's a few areas surrounding it, okay? And watch what they do. See the explosion up there on the far left? It is like that. It's not a one big explosion. It is like a massive shelling. That's what it looks like. Here's another one. Two of them actually. Two in the bottom there. And over to the right even. There's a column there being shelled. And here's another one up close. And another massive one up front. And so what is happening is that these are the ATACMS that the United States has given to Ukraine. And when they come down, they are very, very sophisticated, and they're very pinpointed and very deadly. And they're killing a lot of Russians right now. Russia has lost 400,000 soldiers up to now. Ukraine, it seems like maybe 400,000, 300,000 to 400,000. We're not 100% sure. And so it is a mess, really a mess. So remember necessity. So now Russia says, okay, we need to take down these ATACMS, which are they can shoot about anywhere between 150, 170 miles, I think the newer ones. And they got to get sophisticated and shoot these things down. So Russia's saying right now they can do it. We'll see how this continues to go. The Russian-backed head of Crimea said on Tuesday that long-range ATACMS were shot down over the peninsula, which were annexed by Russia in 2014. So we'll see if that's the case. But if that's the case, it is a big deal. Okay, now is the time for choosing. Now I've got this up loaded here early for us because he said this. And that's what we've been talking about. This is, I believe, God is doing. He is making the world choose. He gave us 2,000 years to choose Christ. Hopefully we get more. Now as we get closer, I think he's going to scare the populations. We say, that's not what God does. I want to remind you of something, a principle. We're going to be talking about principles on next Sunday morning. And if you can pick up on God and his character and his principles, you're going to be wise, much wiser. You're going to be able to help yourself, and you're going to be able to help your friends, okay? So here's a principle. God says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. You got to come to me through my son. People say, nice, thank you for the offer. No thanks, right? So what's the beginning of wisdom? Fear. Fear. If I was to, see, this is the human thing, or either that or I'm a one out, But if I was going, the beginning of wisdom is knowledge. Okay, it's knowledge. It's understanding things. The beginning of wisdom is being sober-minded, being a nice person, trying to figure things out. I want to do things right on the planet, right? I. And God doesn't say that. He says, you guys are broken. Your hearts are wrong. Your mind is off. I need to get your attention. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. If you fear me, you're going to turn to me and look for answers, or you're going to go die. One of the two. The beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. So we pick up our Bibles and we say, tell me about the Lord. Tell me about Jesus Christ. Tell me about judgment, the plan, and how to get to heaven. Because I'm what? I'm scared. And if you've never faced your mortality and turned to the Lord, I don't think your conversion, well, you may be converted, but I don't think it's quite, to the degree I'm talking about your mental conversion now, complete. You need to come to the fear of the Lord. We need to serve him. What did Paul say? With fear and trembling. And people want to say, no, that's awe and respect. There's Greek words for that. That's not what it is. It's not honor. It is fear and trembling, because I know if I go down the wrong path, I am doomed. So we turn to him, and then remember, perfect love casts out fear. We find out he loves us. I love him. I'm going to serve him. And then you don't have that fear, okay? But you got to begin with judgment. Even if we stand alone in front of the whole world, we will continue to fight and beat our enemy. Now, this is where this man needs to be. This is my personal opinion. I think he's the best man for the best job, has been for a while. Is he perfect? No. Does he have problems? Yes. Did he make a mistake on October 7th and before? Yes. And we'll let that all flesh itself out. But he's taken it to him. And we need to choose on this behalf. Biden has been backing him up, and Blinken the other day said, we're behind you all the way. And they did an arms deal with Israel recently. We talked about that. Look what they're doing now. Biden admin puts a hold on U.S. ammo shipments. Because no more artillery and bombing Gaza anymore. And again, Rafah, southern Gaza is the problem. There's at least 1 million to 1.5 million people there. There's a brigade or more of Hamas there. They need to take Hamas out. They need to take them out. There's just no doubt about it. Somebody came on today, I think, or last night, this gentleman for Israel. Even if it's without the blessing of the U.S. administration. And that's a place to be, because they get most of their money and their arms from the United States. So that is a place that they've had to come to. In the terrible Holocaust, there was great leaders in the world who stood by. So the first lesson of the Holocaust is this. If we don't protect ourselves, no one will protect us. And if we have to stand alone, we will stand alone. And that's where Golda Meir was, and others during those times. They knew that they would be decimated if they didn't stand and fight, and they are there again. Now, time to choose. What is happening in the world? And we're watching what's happening in the Middle East and the world. We're seeing the protests around the United States. Iran is going, hey, good for those protesters. And we're going to pay, I think, there was a couple of places saying, we're going to pay for your student loans, and we're going to help you get through your universities because, boy, you're on our side. Man, I tell you what, the United States is in a very, very sorry place. Saudi Arabia steps up arrest of those attacking Israel online. So that's significant. But remember, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, not so much the UAE, but some of the other Oman, some of these other Arabian nations, I say Arabian, I should say Arab nations, they're playing both sides still, because they want to keep peace with the world. They want to go make money. They want to sell. They want to whatever. And they don't want to hurt the Muslims. They don't want to make Iran mad because they might get a missile over the border, right? And Yemen and all those people. So we got to appease Iran because we're, kind of afraid of them. We don't have a security pact with the United States, so we have to coddle to the United States, and we'll get the security pact. Then maybe we can step up against Iran a little bit more, whatever. But they're chickens. Really, that's what it comes down to. Come down and say, you know what? We're not going to have terrorism on the Arabian Peninsula. We're going to stop it. And Iran is the biggest problem on the Arabian Peninsula. And that's where they should be doing, but they're coddling to both sides right now. Washington Post, the negotiations have dragged on. American officials have grown more impatient with Hamas and Qatar, has become an increasingly popular target for U.S. politicians, ranging from Tom Cotton to the Democratic Steny Hoyer from Maryland, who recently said the United States would have to reevaluate its relations with Qatar if it doesn't apply pressure on Hamas. So Qatar is saying, we're trying to push Hamas along, but we love Hamas and we don't want to hurt them, and we don't want them to leave, but the pressure continues to come down on Qatar in a big way. Jordan, Hamas officials threatened to move to Jordan. Well, let me tell you this. First of all, they've already said, we're not taking them. And secondly, remember, Jordan has 3.5 million Palestinians right now. Somebody calls, if there's a Palestine, it's Jordan. Jordan has most of the Palestinians. They took most of the Palestinians. It wrecked. They killed a prince, by the way, in his dad's era. And the Palestinians have been a problem for the king here for decades, the nation there for decades. And so the Jordanians aren't going to take them. I just don't even want to go into that. They don't want to deal with it. So, and Egypt doesn't want it. We'll get into a little bit more of that here in a minute. But a Harvard poll. Now, this is coming out of Harvard. Now, Columbia and Harvard and some of these other universities are allowing these protesters to go to whatever extent. How long do they go? Until they become a problem. They just start destroying stuff and they start causing havoc, and especially when the universities start losing money. When people start bailing out and taking their money, that's going to get them to think twice. So Harvard put out this poll, Harvard Capps Harris poll, conducted on April 24th through 25th. 80% of Americans support Israel. This is from Harvard. 72% think Israel should move forward with its operation in Gaza, in Rafah. That's southern Gaza. 67% think Israel is trying to avoid civilian casualties. 61% support a ceasefire only after the release of all the hostages. I'm surprised that's not higher. 80% think Iran is a danger to the U.S. Only 35% believe it is possible to negotiate with a deal with Iran to stop it from obtaining nuclear weapons. They are the smart ones. The 75% that don't believe this are the smart ones. You can't negotiate with Iran, period. 67% say NATO countries have a responsibility to support Israel against Iran, including 71% of Democrats and 68% of the Republicans. So, UCLA, watch, this is at UCLA, just one of them. I thought I'm not going to show a bunch of these protests, but just watch this one. Now look at the Palestinian area. It's all blocked off, can't see inside. We don't know how many's in there. I don't see a lot of action there. Where was that? University of California, Los Angeles. Los Angeles. You can't get any more liberal than that. Maybe New York City if you're a little bit. So that it was pretty interesting. We stand with Israel. Jewish lives matter. Sheep and the goats. I just want to point this out to you. Matthew 25. I believe in a chronology in a lot of the prophetic statements in the Old Testament and the New. I think Ezekiel is very prophetic, of course, but it's very chronological as well. I believe Matthew. And Jesus is working up toward his leaving. There's a chronology that happens in his dealings toward the end of his life. And when he went to the Mount of Olives, then he comes down and he talks about the sheep and goats judgment. I want to remind you of the judgments that were we're talking about here, okay? The judgments of God are the white throne judgments, which is at the end of the millennium, where everybody who is dead in the ground, who all will be evil, by the way, unbelievers, let's put it that way. It's at the end of the millennium, 1,000 years, that they will be resurrected for judgment, right? When Daniel talks about the resurrection of the righteous, some to eternal life and some to damnation, he is kind of accumulating the judgments, okay? They don't all happen at once. The white throne judgment is at the end of the millennium. It's the last one. Everybody in the ground who are unbelievers get resurrected and they go to their punishment, whatever God has for them. The believer's judgment took place on the cross, okay? It's important to understand. Your judgment is on the cross. If you still believe that God is holding a sin over your head for judgment, you don't understand the cross. Now, there's ramifications of sin. There's ongoing ramifications of sin. There's, if we kill somebody, that person's dead. They don't get raised until the end, and we have to live with that for the rest of our life. That's just a simplified, horrific ramification, but that's the deal. We get a divorce. We do something else. There's ramifications of that. But the sin is forgiven, past, present, and future, or God is a liar. Okay? So that is the judgment on the cross. There's another one called, during the day of Christ, called the judgment of the sheep and goats. So in Matthew 24, it's the tribulation. After the tribulation is the judgment of the sheep and goats. That's why it's in 25. See how that 25 goes after 24? All right. Matthew 25. When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the holy angels with him, then he will sit on the throne of his glory. So this is at the second coming. Must understand that. We believe in the rapture. We're going to get the Bema seat, the reward judgment, is taking place in heaven with the believers. Revelation chapter 4. All right? So that's the Bema seat. So you're judged for your sins on the cross. You're rewarded for your work at the Bema seat, Revelation 4. Okay? But then in the tribulation, those people coming out of the tribulation who are still alive, and there will be many, all the holy angels with him, he will sit on his throne of glory in Jerusalem. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them one from another, as a shepherd divides his sheep from the goats. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. Now watch this, is important. Gary and I and Joe, we believe in a literal interpretation of the scriptures, and you don't use figures or metaphors until it tells you to. Gives you some clues. All right? Like I'm not a sheep, but God calls me a sheep. That's a metaphor. All right? All right. Who is being called before the throne? All the nations. All the nations will be gathered before him. Okay, that's important because I'll show you here in a minute. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." The kingdom is on earth. They are alive. They walk into the kingdom. They literally just are invited into the kingdom that is on earth. They don't get raptured. Their bodies don't get changed. Nothing. They are in the kingdom. Jesus said, "Come over here. You're in the kingdom." It's like playing football, right? On the streets. Where you're picking teams. And you go, there's the left team and there's the right team. And you're going, "Hey, so-and-so, big guy, you're over here." And that's your team. That's what's going on here. Literally, really. Then the king will say to those on the right, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry." Watch. I was hungry in the millennium. I was hungry in the millennium. Now, we can't say this was before the millennium, to some extent, maybe, possibly. But this is at the second coming of Jesus Christ. And it can't be for those who were doing basically anything on his behalf before the rapture, because they would have been raptured, right? These are for the people in the tribulation. I was hungry and you gave me food. I was thirsty and you gave me drink. I was a stranger and you took me in. I was naked and you clothed me. I was sick and you visited me. I was in prison and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, thirsty, give you a drink? When did you see a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? Or when did we see you sick or in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, surely I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to one of the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. Now, you can use that brethren term to say, well, if there's any believer in the tribulation, if you help them, then come on in. Okay? Come on in. But I want to show you something that's happening here. Number one, Jesus is coming for the tribulation to judge the nations. That's important. All the nations will gather before him. He's not talking about people, an individual. He's talking about the nations as a whole. And then the individuals out of those nations and the nations themselves. The reason I say that is because when you go into the millennium, there's going to be nations there. And some are they're going to be given land, property, they're going to be given kings over them. All right? And that nation is going to be rewarded for how they treated the Jews. And the leaders of those nations and the people of those nations are going to be treated on how they help the Jews, protect the Jews, but even believers, other believers during them there as well, okay? So the question is, how can you love, remember, we're in the time of choosing here, how can you love the king of the Jews while despising the Jew of the king? This is Harbinger Daily. Genesis 12:3, I will bless those who bless you. I will curse those who curse you, and in you all families of the earth shall be blessed. That was Abraham. Okay, he was not called a Jew at the time, but out of him came the Jews. Zechariah 12:3, and it shall happen in that day, I will make Jerusalem a very heavy stone for all the peoples. All who heave it away shall surely be cut to pieces, though all nations of the earth are gathered against it. The phrase heave it away in Zechariah comes from a single Hebrew word that means to impose a burden. In the Genesis verse, the Lord says of the descendants of Abraham through Isaac and Jacob that he will curse the one who curses them. The word curse means exactly what we think, to put under a curse. The word curses, however, is a different Hebrew word that means to think little of or to despise. Again, this is not limited to the time of dividing the sheep and goats, but it is proven to be true historically and is thus currently true. And those who think little of Israel and despise them will be cursed, and especially, again, I want to say, coming out of the tribulation. This is not to say that loving Israel saves you, but it does tell us what the attitude of the saved should be towards Israel. It is completely inconsistent to say you love the king of the Jews, but despise the Jew of the kings, the Jews of the king. So don't let the ignorant anti-Semites of our day bully you into silence. If God has not cast off Israel, and he hasn't, we shouldn't either. I want to say this again, that in Zechariah it says specifically 2/3 of the people of the Jews on the earth are going to be killed in the tribulation. And so Paul specifically says, not all of Israel is Israel. Not all the Jews are going to be saved because they don't have the faith of Abraham. It's faith that gets you into the kingdom, always has been and always will be. Listen to Tom Cotton.
Discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran.
Now, I want to make a statement here, and I hope it's understood. This is politics. And this may be how we feel. And when we see those protesters and what they're doing and what Hamas did on October 7th, I'm not going to go into that. It is disgusting. And people who support them doesn't make any kind of sense to us. It does not. And it shouldn't. And we should raise our voices and stand, okay? But we need to be really careful. We need to be careful. Not to not take a stand. We need to take a stand. But if you talk like a politician, be expected to be treated like a politician. We need to talk like Christians, like God-fearing people. Hamas is an evil, if you want to call it empire. They are leading an evil political regime, and they are headed for problems. The people who are supporting them are blind, and they're being, and 2 Corinthians chapter 4, they're blinded. They have a veil over their eyes. And we need to first pray for our enemies, but at the same time, those people in our military, those people in Israeli military, we need to support them. They need to stand up, stop this violence. And if people are causing these problems on the university campuses and in our cities, we need to use force to stop that violence. That's what the government says that they do. That's what God says they do. In Romans, the book of Romans, it says, does the king bear the sword for nothing? They need to stop the violence and use force if need be. They are breaking the law. They're breaking the law. So just understand where we're at, because we can be, elections are coming up. We're going to talk about elections as we get into September, October, November. We're going to be talking about elections more and more, who's what, where, and all that kind of stuff. And we need to discuss these things. But when all is said and done, I want to remind you, where did this anti-Semitism in history, where was the harshest anti-Semites? They were with the nationalists, the far right in many of the countries. And I want to remind you that. Now this comes out of the international courts, okay? International courts, the office of the prosecutor. And I want to remind you that these international courts, which the Bushes helped kind of put into Clinton, some others, but the Bushes had a lot to do with. If you break a law and then you walk into the Netherlands and they say, hey, you broke a law, international law, you're being arrested. That's why when Netanyahu is taken before the ICC, the International Court, if he leaves Israel, he can be arrested. Putin, he can't leave Russia, because if they find him someplace, they can arrest him, all right? So the international courts are stepping in, okay? So watch this political mess that we are walking into. Church, watch the political mess. A House bill, this is Todd Starnes, a House bill 2 days ago, as written, would criminalize passages of the New Testament. It's either intentional or incompetence. And all of a sudden, people are sending posts, phone calls, discussions, see what our Congress is doing. And do you think that Mike Johnson's going to... You think that's Mike Johnson? Or do you think that's some conservative, real, wonderful Christian types after Franklin Graham just called Mike Johnson a wonderful man, conservative Christian guy, that they're going to do this? Incompetence? So watch. Charlie Kirk, who I've had on the edge for a while, and he's been a wonderful guy, and in general he still is, but I haven't pinned him yet. So he comes out and he says, did the House of Representatives just make parts of the Bible illegal? Now, why would you put that on social media just like that? Charlie Kirk has become very popular, and in the church, very popular. And in general, he's very intelligent, very well spoken, good to listen to most of the time. Most of the time. Tucker Carlson was there for a little while, wasn't he? At Fox. Tucker Carlson, off of Charlie Kirk asking this question, Tucker comes out and says, yes, the New Testament. And I'm telling you that Tucker Carlson's the problem. And Candace Owen is a problem. They're anti-Semitic. And at one point, they were on top of the conservative list of people to listen to. Now, watch this. This is an executive order out of 2019 by guess who? Donald Trump. And I'm not going to read this, by the authority vested in the President of by the Constitution. Just underline. Discrimination against Jews may give rise to a Title VI. They want a Title VI in this executive order. Violation when the discrimination is based on an individual's race, color, or national origin. It shall be the policy of the executive branch to enforce Title VI against prohibitive forms of discrimination rooted in anti-Semitism as vigorously as against all other forms of discrimination prohibited by Title VI, okay, of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, okay? All executive departments and agencies charged with enforcing Title VI shall consider the following. The non-legally binding working definition, this is important, of anti-Semitism adopted on May 26, 2016 by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And we don't need to read, which states, anti-Semitism is a certain perception of Jews which may be expressed as hatred toward Jews. Rhetorical and physical manifestations of anti-Semitism are directed toward Jewish or non-Jewish individuals and or the property, toward Jewish community institutions and religious facilities, and the contemporary example of anti-Semitism identified by the IHRA to the extent that any examples might be useful as evidence of discriminatory intent. In other words, in the Trump administration, he said, we're going to follow the IHRA discriminatory anti-Semitism definition, and we're going to uphold it and bring people to bear if they break it. Within 120 days of this order, the head of each agency charged with enforcing Title VI shall submit a report to the President, what they're doing and those kinds of things. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law, and then he signs it, okay? It's the working definition of anti-Semitism by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. And you know what the House wants to do? Do you know what the good people in the Congress want to do? The speech and religious freedom is not in the bill. Has nothing to do with speech and religious freedom. The definition of anti-Semitism is a widely accepted definition, and the House simply wants to codify the law. It has law. They simply want to codify the definition. That's all they were doing. And all of a sudden, you get Todd Starnes and Tucker, and now is it Charlie Kirk? And who else coming out saying they're going to outlaw the New Testament? Why did they say the New Testament? The Jews put Jesus to death? Who put Jesus to death? The Jews, the Romans, the pagans, you know, and then the Christians ran, right? You see, this is what we're being caught. This is what we're being caught into. You be real careful by looking at bites, looking at snips, going, look what they're doing. Look what they're doing to our laws. Look, you know, we are calling good Christian people into account when we do that. God has some people into very good places to fight against this stuff. We do need to get to all the facts. We need to understand all the facts. There's bad stuff coming down the pike. okay? And we will try to understand those things. Remember, one last thing. This is really important. In the Old Testament, over and over and over, God specifically says when it has anything to do with the court and judgment, on the basis of 2 or 3 witnesses. Okay? And Jesus was the same. He sent out the disciples 2 by 2, right? And all of that stuff. Jesus said, he was talking to the world basically, I think, at that point. He said, everybody's, I'm paraphrasing, you don't believe me, but I don't need your witness because I have the Father. 2 or 3 witnesses. Yeah, I think there's 3. Okay, I'm going to turn this down because I was told that this might be better on some of these. If I just read this, okay? Sooner or later, this kind of support for the Zionist regime by the American regime will diminish. It might not stop completely, but its diminishing is important. This is why the demonstrations in the U.S. campuses are important. What we see in what we're watching, we like, is what they're saying, basically. If not for the Islamic Republic, the case of the Palestinian idea would have been closed years ago. The idea of resistance belongs to Iran, but on the operational level, when it comes to recruiting connections and building networks, the Iranian state has not been involved in a sufficient level. These American students are our people. If tensions between America and Iran rise tomorrow or day after, these are the people who will have to take to the streets to support Iran. Personally, I think that the potential to repeat in the U.S. what Iran did in Lebanon is much higher. Our Hezbollah-style groups in America are much larger than what we have in Lebanon. Now, America is a great Satan and our main enemy, but we have hope in these areas. Now, remember going back to Lebanon real briefly. Lebanon, did you realize it was a Christian nation? And then Hezbollah moved in, and then they started stirring up the strife, and war broke out in the Middle East, and a bunch of Christians died, and the country got split. There's still a very significant Christian alliance there, but there's Muslims, there's the Shiites, and Lebanon is a complete mess because they basically allowed this in. And this is what's happening in Europe and the United States. Arab and Muslim leaders blame the West for Gaza. It's coming to our shores. 57 Muslim countries got together and said, will we take the Palestinians? Stop for a second. Let me get this.
Why aren't more Arab countries in the Middle East taking in Palestinian refugees? The onset of a renewed war between Israel and Hamas has led to fears that millions of Palestinian people living in the Gaza Strip may be forced to become refugees. But despite the fact that Gaza shares a border with Egypt, the Egyptian government almost immediately ruled out any possibility of accepting Palestinian refugees. In fact, Egypt is currently constructing an even larger border wall with Gaza than the one it currently has in place. Now, many outside observers have asked why Egypt, a majority Arab and Islamic nation, would turn away the Palestinian people. And of course, many have pointed out that it may serve the political interests of many Arab nations to refuse to accept Palestinian refugees because it allows them to then blame Israel for any sort of humanitarian crisis that unfolds. But the thing is, historically, many Arab nations have accepted Palestinian refugees, and that may be why Egypt doesn't want to now. For example, in 1991, the Kuwaiti government actually expelled nearly 300,000 Palestinians in the aftermath of the first Gulf War, and this represented an astonishing 18% of Kuwait's entire population. So what was the reason? Well, the Palestinian Liberation Organization had actually supported Saddam Hussein's invasion of Kuwait a year earlier. And this support only grew after Iraq began attacking Israel with rockets throughout the war. After Kuwait's liberation, the government considered much of the Palestinian community to be complicit and the Iraqi occupation of their country. And in response, nearly all Palestinians were deported in just a few months. And this wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Decades earlier, the Palestinian groups operating in Jordan had come to openly call for the overthrow of Jordan's monarchy in the aftermath of the Six-Day War. At the time, the PLO maintained its own separate army on Jordanian soil and used that armed force to sow chaos. Armed gangs of PLO militants drove around the capital of Amman, robbing families and businesses in the name of collecting financial assistance for the ongoing war of attrition against Israel. When members of the Jordanian police and army tried to defend their citizens from these attacks, they were attacked and killed. The Palestinian political network operated as a state within a state, with militants repeatedly using Jordan to launch rockets into Israel. The Marxist-Leninist Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine even went so far as to hijack multiple planes, diverting the flights to a Palestinian-controlled airfield in Jordan, where the passengers were held hostage. By September 1970, the Jordanian army had finally had enough. A full-scale war with the PLO broke out, and after 10 months of fighting, the Palestinians were driven out of the country. Yet, as a parting gift, a Palestinian terrorist group known as Black September assassinated the Jordanian prime minister. Sadly, the story doesn't end there, because the PLO then moved into Lebanon, where they allied themselves with Marxist and socialist movements that were seeking to overthrow Lebanon's conservative Maronite Christian government. The presence of thousands of Palestinian militants flooding into the country completely destabilized Lebanon and plunged the entire nation into chaos. Less than 4 years after the PLO was expelled from Jordan, Lebanon found itself in the middle of one of the most bloody and chaotic civil wars in Middle Eastern history, from which it has never fully recovered. In short, Palestinian organizations have not just attacked Israel, they have sowed unrest in many of the neighboring Arab and Muslim countries as well, and this has led those governments to the conclusion that allowing for mass immigration or even just refugee camp resettlement within their borders would lead to domestic unrest for their own countries. And this, of course, only exacerbates the humanitarian crisis for those Palestinian non-combatants caught in the middle. The problem is, as long as terrorist organizations like Hamas and others are elected to represent the Palestinian people, their plight will most likely continue, as neither Israel nor apparently the surrounding Arab nations want to see their own populations threatened by terrorist groups.
And so I think 6 months ago, 57 Muslim countries got together and talked about the Palestinian issue, and they said, okay, who's going to take any Palestinians? Not one. Not one. So, because they know what Jordan's mess. Jordan still has I think 3.5 million, and it's a mess. So anyway, that's the deal. What are the ramifications? What are the ramifications of the protest? What are the ramifications of Gaza, Hamas getting out of control? What are the ramifications of Iran stirring the pot, Russia stirring the pot, China stirring the pot? What are the ramifications of the evil stuff happening, whether it's on his campus or in Russia? The ramifications are an equal, we want to say equal, an opposite reaction, but it might not be equal. It is going to be an opposite reaction. And I believe that this is rise, it's going to continue to build and happen. We got to get on top of the chaos. And who's going to get on top of the chaos? He's going to come out of nowhere, and he's going to have the answer to our problems. It's the Antichrist. And he's going to come and say, I can do this, I can fix this, and the nations are going to pay attention to him. He's going to have a lot of money, a lot of armies. He's going to be very wise, and he's going to be able to handle it. Now, I still believe that the East, remember the kings of the East, and this, they're going to oppose him. It specifically says, the Bible says that. They're going to oppose him, but in general, the world is going to follow him, and this is raising up to that. So, the cops they send the police in, we're going to fix that. We're going to, we got a bug, we got a new COVID, got to fix that, right? We got a border problem, we got to fix that. These things are going to be fixed by people who are going to either going to be extreme right or extreme left. I'm going to solve it with money and wokeism, or I'm going to solve it with nationalism and popularism and problems there. And I believe that's where the Antichrist comes from. That's my opinion. Thank you, Ireland. Here's what's happening in Ireland is a complete disaster. And I'm still waiting for people to revolt here, because this is one of the biggest problems in the West right now, and the Irish are getting tired of it. The problem is it too late? Now, here is a great video, and if you're interested in this at all, this is a 9-minute video. I'm not gonna play it, but her name is Eva, and her name is Vlaardingerbroek. Okay, good luck with that. She's a politician out of the EU. She's Dutch. She's basically saying Europe is lost. The invader was invited in, and we were made to pay for it, physically, literally, with money, and it's too late. I want to remind you, there's 25 million, possibly more, Muslims in Europe. How are you going to do that? How are you going to fix that? We might not be able to fix the thing in the United States. The mayor of London is Muslim. Birmingham, Muslim. Leeds, Blackburn, Sheffield, Oxford. You ever heard these names? Loughton, Oldham, Rockdale, Muslim. All this was achieved by only 4 million Muslims out of 66 million people in England. That's just in England. It is clear, this is a Muslim speaking, it is clear that the elements of the right in the UK are embittered at the rising population of Muslim and or ethnic communities in major cities. Let's be real. If you are waiting for a policy or a party that will remove 1.4 million Muslim British citizens from London, that's just London, or 350,000 Muslims from Birmingham, such a policy will probably never come. Practically speaking, you can solve your problem by going to other towns and cities with less Muslims or ethnics. 93% of the country is non-Muslim. If you can't tolerate us, you know where the door is. And this, again, for somebody who spent time in the military, but somebody who just lived in the 70s here and played in the oceans and the streams and caught fish and was at peace in general, preached the gospel, heard the gospel preached. This is very, very concerning. Very concerning. Where is going to be this backlash, and does it come? At least 5 EU countries to recognize Palestinian state by the end of May. The Harry Potter castle is on fire or burnt. And whether you like Harry or not, I don't know, but that's very interesting.
We've seen what happened when Europe opened their doors to jihad. Look at Paris, look at London. They're no longer recognizable. And I'm going to get myself into a lot of trouble with the folks in Paris and the folks in London. But you know what? That's the fact. They are no longer recognizable, and we can't let that happen to our country. We have incredible culture, tradition. Nothing wrong with their culture, their tradition. Can't let that happen here, and I'll never let it happen to the United States of America.
Okay, so it's make or break time. As the Biden administration renews efforts to broker a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas, a key factor driving the urgency is Saudi Arabia's desire to finalize normalization with Israel. However, the Saudis insist that Israel commit to a concrete plan for an eventual Palestinian state. This is crucial because they, honestly, I'm telling you, this doesn't mean that much to the Saudis or anybody else, but they have to stick to those guns. They must, unless something breaks them, unless something happens. Gaza may be the first stone to fall with this two-state solution. We'll see. The Saudis were very upfront, said Stephen A. Cook of the New York Council on Foreign Relations, this is a make or break moment. If Sinwar, the Hamas Gaza leader, is ready for a ceasefire deal, it will happen. I suspect the administration believes if Israel does Rafah, nothing will be possible. So right now for them, they think the southern Gaza is make or break. But watch what's happening here now. And this November is going to be very, very interesting. I've told you that I have a problem with Trump. And there's several problems with Trump. You can work them out. We can talk about him, whatever. He's obnoxious sometimes. He's got way too much pride. We can talk about those things. But I love him on the border. I love him on some other things, the military and those things. But watch this. This could be the change. I'm not sure a two-state solution anymore is going to work. And I've been waiting for him to say this. We'll see where he goes with it. About building immigration camps, he goes on a couple things, so just listen. Or put up with me, I should say. About building immigration camps on the U.S., I would not rule out anything, Trump said, but there wouldn't be that much of a need. So he's going on a couple things because he said the plan is to deport migrants in the U.S. illegally back to the home countries. We're not leaving them in the country, we're bringing them out. That's going to be a huge job. It was 11 million, I think, in country before Biden. Then I think it was another 11 or 12 million that's been in. So there's 20 to 25 million in country, I believe. I'm not sure. Trump said he would use the National Guard troops to assist in the plan. I don't think I have to do that. I think the National Guard would be able to do that. If they weren't able to, then I'd use the military. I tell you what, this is hardcore stuff. Trump was asked about the 1878 Posse Comitatus Act. You can't use the military for civilian stuff. Well, these aren't civilians. These are people that aren't legally in our country. This is an invasion of our country. Now, this, I'm telling you, on the political issue, this is the statement, isn't it? This really is it. Are these people civilians? Are they citizens of our country? Do they apply to our laws? And you got to come down on your decision there. On Ukraine, Trump said if elected in November, I'm going to try and help Ukraine, but Europe has to get there also. And that's an interesting take there. He's not dumping Ukraine, which is kind of interesting. Trump said a two-state solution between Israel and the Palestinians, a bedrock of the U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East for decades. I'm not sure a two-state solution anymore is going to work. Trump said the animosity between the Israelis and the Palestinians was now so intense it makes a two-state solution very, very tough. And I am finally glad to see him breaking on this. We'll see where he goes. Because I want to say this again to you. That Zechariah and other books talk about the stone of Jerusalem. It's going to be a heavy lift. And if you divide his land and his country, to me, this is a no player. You don't go here. And that's a big deal. I'm going to end here. I've got more, but I'm just going to end here. Trump still blames Netanyahu for some things that happened in the past. And now he's talking about putting some blame on Netanyahu for October 7th. So I'm not sure if Netanyahu, I think, is the best prime minister for the time there, maybe one of the best prime ministers they've had. I believe that. Trump was excellent in some ways. He could be better, but if these two can't get together, it's going to be very, very interesting. And we'll pick this one up, I think, a little bit more next week. I think he likes Gallant a little bit more, or Gantz, I can't remember which one. So this thing on the two-state solution going forward is going to be very interesting because they're going to have to get together and hammer this thing out. I do believe that after Gaza is dealt with, that the nation will go after Netanyahu and sacrifice him. I think it's going to be a big problem going forward. As we go into the summer, keep your eyes peeled and be safe. But just know this, that there's an opposite reaction to what is going on with these evil people. The Holy Spirit is still at work. The church is still at work. Good people in good places. God is either sovereign or he's not. He has people where he wants them or he doesn't. Right? And we know he does. And so just remember that little pamphlet I hand out. I have a couple still left. But the sovereignty of God is what you want to count on for all these things. And then we'll see what the mind of God is through the summer and in October. Stay the course, be encouraged, and be the teacher that we talked about on Sunday morning. That reprove, rebuke, correct, train in righteousness. That's our job. All of us are in the ministry together. Let's pray. Lord, we love you, and we are encouraged by your word. We are sometimes discouraged by what is happening on the planet, but again, foremost is that you said these things would be coming, and so we know that your word is true. And there shouldn't be any anxiousness. There might be some trepidation, there's some concerns, there's some worries, there's some very much sadness, but we will not be anxious, and we will not be unfaithful. We will stand the test because you have allowed us, you've given us the Spirit to do so. You've given us each other in the church, and we love you for that. We praise you for it. We thank you for the opportunity to be here in a time such as this. It is magnificent to watch your great hand. In Jesus' name, amen.